currently averaging about 5% higher than the same period last year. The month of November is traditionally a down month for a couple of reasons. You know, sales tax lags a couple of months. The other thing is that the payment in lieu of tax that Jackson Energy Authority remits to the city, the November month is always a month that is somehow different than every other month out of the year. And so we expect that to jump back up. We are still ahead for the year. Property tax projections, property tax collections are on track with where they ought to be. You guys saw an increase in your property tax estimates this year. Last year they were $35.4 million, and they're going to be up quite a bit. It's 35.4 last year, and it's 35.9 this year. So there's an additional $500,000 in potential property tax. The thing that we talked about at the work session the other night, Councilman McMean asked that I present that information to the Budget Committee as well, just as a point of reference for what we see as potential revenue growth in the coming years. There are several pilot agreements coming due between now and 2030. By the end of 2027, we should see an additional $1 million in property tax that's converted from pilots into just real property tax. And by the end of 2030, we should see about $1.2 million in new property tax revenue, again, converting from pilots to just regular property tax payments.
Remind me when we'll see the 1 million?
By the end of 27, give or take. That number jumps up significantly because there's a pilot agreement that expires in 2027 that was, you had a local manufacturer that had a major expansion internally. They added about $47 million in personal property, essentially, and so that will begin to roll back onto your tax base at that time. The other thing is, the other day we talked with the folks at the building department. To date, from about August until now, when they did the last property tax assessment update for property tax billing purposes in August. And so from that time period until now, they've added $62 million roughly in new residential construction and $51 million in new commercial construction. That amounts to about $580,000 in new potential property tax revenue that should come on by the time we bill the next time. In order to validate those numbers, I talked with the folks at the assessor's office. The 2024 assessment was $2.23 billion, and you know how an assessment works. It's a 40% or 30% or 25%, but that assessment now is about $2.28 billion, which is an increase of $50 million in the assessment for the city of Jackson. So the difference between the assessment and the building numbers that I gave you a minute ago is the assessment includes new construction as well as demolitions, deletions, and changes. And because, you know, if you just go based on new buildings, that doesn't take the stuff that rolls off the tax roll for whatever reason. Based on that assessment change, you're looking at about $819,000 in new property tax that the city of Jackson will be able to bill for tax year 25. And Frank, that's essentially the information that we talked about.
Can we get that in a hard copy?
Did I send that to you?
Mm-mm.
Okay. I'll send that to you, sir.
That's great news.
Yeah,
Especially
I mean,
27.
you guys are sending, I mean, people are building everywhere. And I was talking to a developer the other day, and they're looking at an additional project, and I'm like, well, we were talking about the housing shortage that doesn't just affect Jackson, but affects basically the region. And you've got developers that are trying to address that, and that's good for Jackson. So that's it for a revenue update, unless you have questions.
So from this calendar year, fiscal year, to next fiscal year?
Let's call it a tax year.
Okay.
Because those things sort of overlap in different ways. Right now, we know, based on the assessment data, that there's $819,000 in new tax. Now, that number will change, I mean, obviously, I mean, we're just 6 months into that period, and you'll have deletions and additions to go on that, but, you know, I mean, that's a reassuring number.
Wonderful. Any questions? Go back and approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve them.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Budget amendments.
There are two budget amendments before you. One is a donation to the fire department from Dixie Products for $10,000, and it's fairly straightforward.
Motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion approved.
The second one is police received a JAG grant. That's a 50-50 split between the police and the Madison County Sheriff's Office.
Motion.
Any discussion? All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Wonderful. Purchasing card.
So one of the things that, when I arrived here, one of the things that, speaking with the purchasing director, is you guys have been trying to roll out P cards or purchasing cards for a while. Part of the problem was a policy, and part of the problem is not the right word. Part of the holdup may have just been the will to go ahead and push ahead. And with his help, we're working on that. Who's familiar with what a P card is? Okay. It's a specialized credit card, and they allow some control over expenses. And the other difference is that right now we issue on an as-needed basis a credit card to city employees, and then they bring it back. In this case, we would issue a P card to the employees, each employee, an individual employee, who would be accountable for the purchases on that. They can be restricted to the type of purchase, and you're going to reconcile these monthly on a staff member and a department level basis. It creates a tremendous, it creates a lot more accountability on an individual basis, and it also creates some cost control that we don't currently have on some of those credit card transactions. It's going to replace many or most of the store cards. If you're thinking like Lowe's or Best Buy or things, Sam's, if we've got a credit card somewhere, it'll replace most of those cards. We're going to start that by running a small test group just to make sure that we've got the process for reconciliation down, because rapid reconciliation is the key to making that process work. Our partners at First Horizon are great at this, and it's going to be a lot smoother process, I think, once we get that implemented. And I just wanted you to be aware that that's coming. I'll have more to say about that after we run our test group. So,
And do we have a policy yet?
we have a policy. We are still developing that. I was talking to Zach this morning because he's a member of the National Public Purchasing Association, or one of those, and so he sent out an email asking for comments on the policy that he's got, and he got several. First of all, the policy that we've developed is a good policy. There weren't that many changes, but there were some things that other people brought up that said this might be a good idea, and so we're going to make some of those changes and see how that works. So
And I know we have P cards and we make money off of those.
I understand there are some rebates to be gathered, and I mean it will be a small revenue source compared to the other revenue sources that you have. But I mean, it's certainly something that we'll be able to capture.
And any idea when you want to start?
I'm hoping that we'll get the test group out in the next month.
If it goes well?
If it goes well, probably roll those out widely in the next 2 to 3 months.
Okay, cool.
There's a lot of things moving, Frank.
Yes.
So
And that's the next thing we're going to talk about, is a very moving.
that's right.
Any questions?
Couple of questions. First Horizon will be the bank,
Yes, ma'am.
and how did we come across that
Um,
as the choice bank to run this program through? Secondly, how many people will, in this initial rollout, have that P card?
Well, First Horizon is our banking partner that's where we hold our funds, and they have a P card program that is well developed and prepared to take this. It's just part of the process. It's one of the services that they offer.
Did
And
we put it out for RFP?
I do not know because that would have happened before I got
We put
here.
out the banking services for RFP, and that was part of their proposal for banking services,
How long ago?
last year.
So how many people will have the P card initially?
It's going to be based on the needs in those departments. You have some employees that are regularly using charge cards for certain types of purchases. I'm imagining that those will be the first people that get those, and then as the program develops, we'll have to evaluate based on a departmental level. The supervisors in those departments will have a lot to say about who needs to have a P card. The policy, of course, if there's any sort of if an employee having a P card creates problems with reconciliation or accountability, they won't have one very long. I mean, you know, but we don't have a number yet on that. We're gonna have to talk to those supervisors to find out who those people are gonna be.
Do you have a number on the test group?
It's probably 4.
Great questions.
Good.
Any others? Thank you, Nathan. Tyler Munis.
So there are several things happening in Tyler. One of the most important to you guys probably is going to be the implementation of the budgeting module. Excuse me. The city has historically done much of their budgeting basically in Excel spreadsheets, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But you pass in spreadsheets around, and there's this version and there's that version, and the budgeting module is from a it's bottom up type thing. You start out in different departments, and it looks very much like an online version of Excel with a lot of extra tools built into it. So it helps with payroll projections. It helps with recurring expense projections if you want to use those tools. And then as the different departments submit a budget, it moves up. Even some of these sub-departments, I suspect, will do their own budgeting. I mean, you've got different groups in the police department that may actually work on their things and then send it up for approval. As it gets further and further up the chain, it locks out the folks in the bottom for making additional changes. You know, that way you don't have to go back and talk about it again. And then it'll be able to present that information, hopefully in a decipherable and actionable way to the Budget Committee and the City Council when that time comes. As part of that implementation, there are 2 rounds of training. We're going to initially train our finance team and some of the executive offices so that they can understand what they're getting, and also so that we can support the other departments as they begin to use the tool. And the second round will be for various department heads and whoever it is in their department that helps with their accounting. In some cases, it's a deputy chief. In some cases, there's an accounting clerk or an administrative person, but a lot of those folks have got some help, and we'll provide the training for those people. We hope to use this project, this module this year, as opposed to anything else. The holdup right now is getting the
Calendar year?
Pardon me, sir?
Calendar or fiscal?
Fiscal year.
Coming from next
I
fiscal.
mean, we're hoping to use it for the coming fiscal year's budget. The holdup right now is getting the people at Tyler to schedule the implementation and the training for those things. And this is a difficult time of the year to schedule anything, you know, but we're hoping to get that training scheduled in December or January, at least for our finance teams. So we are continuing to clean up data so that we can bring the Open Finance module online. Some of you guys weren't here at the last Budget Committee where we talked about the Open Finance module, and so are you familiar with that module? Okay. So the Open Finance module is a public-facing tool that basically will allow anybody, anywhere, to get on the City of Jackson's website and look at the budget, expenses year-to-date, revenue year-to-date, look at our most common vendors, look at our highest paid vendors. You can basically drill down into those categories and slice and dice that data just about any way you want to. In order to make it usable, the migration from the legacy system and the way that the data was presented in the legacy system has got to be cleaned up quite a bit. There are several mapping errors in the way that we've imported the budget this year because the general ledger account numbers they just weren't right. You know, I mean, the function is correct, but the general ledger account number doesn't line up to anything so there's several of those things. And we're also struggling just a little bit with revenue collection integration from the legacy system, because most of the revenue that we collect is still coming through legacy, and it has to be converted and then imported into Tyler. And so to be able to accurately show those numbers in the open finance module, it's got to be current. And you know, we're lagging behind sometimes a couple of weeks trying to get that data in there, and so it's not really a fair representation. But once we get those mapping errors and that data cleaned up, it should be able to turn most of that module on fairly quickly. At the same time, there's an internal tool that uses exactly the same data called Executive Insight. It just provides a different way of looking at some of that data. Both of those tools will be available basically at the same time to us. Zach Polk in purchasing is preparing to train. Oh, by the way, as far as the data cleanup on that, I am incredibly grateful to Norma Ship and the accounting team, because they're doing the Lord's work right there, finding that stuff. You know, we had, I reported in cabinet yesterday that Austin Clark has been in the accounting team since he got here, according to payroll records. And I told him, I said, we've got a desk for you down there if you want to go. And he shook his head. It is just the way that some of the employee expense allocations have been done. And Norma and Jessica Ernie are working hard actually right now on some of those payroll allocations and some of these other things, and I'm grateful for that. Zach in Polk in purchasing is preparing to train or retrain departments on issuing requisitions and purchase orders. We talked about that last time. He is very near ready to do that. One of the things right now is our purchase order system is not tied. First of all, our purchase order system does not create encumbrances, and there is no actual liquidation of a purchase order. You don't know unless you check where. Yeah, you give me that look. Anyway, sorry. And it is an effect of the legacy system, Dave, is what's going on, because this system didn't support those things. Okay, so it's going to create some cost controls, because when somebody goes into requisition something, it's going to tell them, it's like, you don't have any money for that. I mean, now it could be an error, or it could require a budget amendment, or it could just be that they're not going to get that this year. I mean, you know, whatever. But apparently the departments have been trained on that process before, but we didn't implement the purchasing and requisition modules that quickly. And so we're going to retrain those folks. At the same time, we're going to provide some training to them on how they can interpret their own budget in the Tyler Munis system, because it's the perfect time. Because if you're going to issue a purchase order, you got to look at your budget anyway. And so that's a good time to provide that training. And then, you know, we talked about the projects modules. And again, I've talked about this a couple of times, and so if you've already heard this, I'm sorry, but one of the things that Tyler has is a projects module, which integrates with the general ledger, integrates with purchasing, integrates with payables, integrates with all of these different things, but it allows you to track projects over multiple fiscal years without having to do a lot of manual, we have to carry this over. It also allows you to consolidate the information about that project, so that if there are payroll expenses, if there are expenses that are in different funds, you can still consolidate that information to make it easy to look at a specific project. And so for some of the capital projects that you guys have engaged in over the years, I'm thinking senior center, animal care, that sort of thing that's taken more than one fiscal year, sometimes more than 2 or 3, you'll be able to track those particular projects, I think, much better. To be honest with you, part of me wants to get that going because there are so many capital projects, but as far as needs go in technical solutions, that's not as far up the list as getting requisitions and purchase orders and some of those other things. So I had initially thought we might be able to get that done in first quarter 25, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure that it'll be in this fiscal year at this point. Are there questions about the Tyler Munis?
So Nathan,
stuff?
I just have a fundamental question. I don't know how long I've been on the budget committee, but however long I've been on this budget committee, Tyler Munis has been a topic of conversation.
Yes.
And so my question is, I guess it's really twofold. Is it going to be a conversation forever? Because we're always going to be implementing changing, switching out, right? Or can we say, by this day, we're done, right? Like, or is it just this ever-evolving thing?
I think, yes. And, you know, I think, you know, Bob explained that we had some staff turnover, pushed it back. Tyler had some staff turnover, then acquisition piece that pushed it back. And so, I think we're on a much better path now. Nathan's working every day, and so it's, I think the transition time we can have, it's gonna be finite, but there's still gonna be modules that we can onload and we can upload and things like that. So I think there's a piece of it that will be final, that we'll actually have, we're done with legacy, we're in Tyler, and then there'll be more components that can help us out and help us just be more effective and efficient.
Right. So when are we, maybe that's the right question. When are we done with legacy? When do we take it out back?
So, it's interesting because there are two systems that we are relying on, and the mayor was exactly right there, but there are two systems that we rely on right now for revenue collection. It's the H&S portion, the solid waste, and then property tax. They're both still legacy products. We meet every week on property tax because they have had struggles converting some of our legacy data. We're getting very close to that. If you wanted to just say, we're not going to care what anybody ever paid from years before, we could import a current property tax CAMA file that's issued by the state and have no trouble. In property tax collection, being able to go back and look over years or sometimes decades is important, and so we want to preserve that data. That's been the hitch with that. They thought that they would actually be able to collect property tax in the new system this year, and here it is December, and we're not even close to it. And so there are two pieces. The property tax collection piece, it is our intention, and I told the mayor this the other day. I said, if I got to get on a plane and go to Tyler, Texas and straighten this out, I'm going to do that.
Well, because the question, again,
I'm not blaming them.
As a committee
right.
member, it's like somebody knows how to fix it, right? And so is it our city folks who are the cog in the wheel, or is it our vendor? And if it's our vendor, do we have any accountability built into this vendor relationship to get them to do better?
Well, they very much, for the property tax conversion, you guys have paid for this. And they would very much like to be done with it, for the property tax. You can tell when you talk to them. It's some of the ways the data is formatted in the legacy system. They are truly, the legacy system generates data as a flat text file. It's not a tab delimited file. It's not a CSV. It's not character based. It's just and I don't know, I mean, that thing was developed, the software was developed in the late 70s or early 80s and was innovative at the time, but database formats were not something that were as robust as they are now. And so trying to interpret that data, they've got software developers at Tyler that are helping tweak the import process. We've scheduled a sample import January 13th to see the last sample import that they did broke. I mean, it just didn't work, and that was about 4 months ago. They have come far enough now that they think that we'll be able to do this. We've got a day and a half scheduled to go through an import to see if that works. Property tax, to go back to your question, property tax is the first thing. H&S or the solid waste payments are the second. Solid waste uses a utility billing system, which is very robust and handy. Again, we would like to preserve data, especially data for accounts that have been written off or somehow owe us money. And the conversion process from there has been extensive. I am told that they basically said, we're not going to worry about this until we get property tax done in the fall of '24. It should have been this fall. Well, and so nobody's really looked at utility billing, and I'm going to call it that just because that's what it is. Nobody's really looked at utility billing in 6 or 8 months because they were going to wait till they got property tax done. I met the other day with Austin, Chris, Lalani, and we're working on getting that utility billing portion rolling again. They're trying to schedule time sometime in January, February, and I talked with the software people there, and I said, when is the implementation window? When is it foreseeable that if everything went perfectly, we would be able to implement utility billing and utility payment collection in Tyler, and they said May, which was disappointing to me. But there's a lot of work to be done there. I mean, it's, but if we get utility billing and property tax into Tyler, we won't need legacy anymore, except perhaps as a reference tool to go back and look at some other stuff. We get those things done. We get the budgeting as far as the core stuff that the city committed to a couple of years ago. We get those things done. We get the budgeting module. We get projects online, business license, and a couple of other things, and we'll be done. And business license isn't hard. You're taking business licenses right now into legacy, and so you shouldn't convert until you get that done. Now, along the way, there are some, as the mayor pointed out, there are some new opportunities for us in Tyler that will integrate with that ERP system and we're exploring some of those things. But that will be new. As far as what we do, I think we'll be done by property tax time next year. I hope, Lord, I hope so. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. No, I mean, I've only been here, and I'm still,
I
but
mean, it's,
anyway.
people laugh when I speak to groups and say that it was like the Oregon Trail that we worked with, and it's, just getting in the new system.
And I'm
One
guessing
more
there's
thing.
I'm guessing there's no time in the contract, right? You said we paid them already,
You paid them for the property tax integration.
but was there a project timeline?
There was, and you went past it about a year and a half ago.
And
I don't mean that. It's probably a year.
I don't know, but
yeah.
I'm guessing there weren't any teeth in it to punish them.
Because it wasn't just them in the delay on it, because it was our
I
staff
got
turnover too.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking to the folks, I was talking about utility billing, solid waste. The people that started that project are no longer there. And I mean, it's an interesting thing. Now, I've said all of this, and it sounds like we've been a little negative, okay?
A little.
Sounds like we've been a little negative. This is an incredibly robust enterprise resource planning system. It has tremendous capabilities. The way that the different modules integrate is incredibly impressive. You can work from almost anywhere. It can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be, and I am incredibly optimistic that this is going to be a great and wonderful thing when we get all these things done. Now, I say that down in the accounting office, and one of the people there throws a plushie at me every time I say that. But I mean, I am optimistic, and it is impressive, and it is going to be it is already a tremendous tool, and when everything is done, it's going to be sleek, fast, and incredibly useful, and I'm excited about that.
We long for the day.
It feels almost Old Testament sometimes, but yes, it's I'm excited about it, and we're going to get there. So.
You want to add anything?
That's all, yeah, he's did a great job.
Thank you. Proposed bonds.
When we talked about it, we wanted to put this on the agenda so that if you wanted to have a discussion about this, we could. I don't really have anything to say other than the information that you've received and that's been presented at the different work sessions and meetings. But here we are.
Timeline for RFP?
I'm sorry?
The timeline on that bond for RFP? Any idea?
I mean, we had anticipated closing on the sale of the bonds in February, but that timeline assumed that City Council would approve the authorizing resolutions in December. And so I suspect that the offer documents will be available to the public at the 1st of February. If you guys, I don't have that calendar in front of me, but I expect the offer documents will be public to the folks that might purchase the bonds, the official statement and those sort of things in February, and closing on the bonds in March. But I haven't seen the calendar. That's just based on the conversations that we've had with the financial people.
Any update on the homeless shelter?
We're still negotiating.
thoughts on the amount for paving?
No, I mean,
No change?
no, what I presented is not changed unless you all want to, you all, the council want to go through and line item change stuff.
I probably don't have what I want to show her in my folder, so I don't. I'm sorry, I snorted.
It's more impressive when there's a woman that can snort.
I do not have that, but I can send it to you. I can show you the old calendar, but just to move everything up on mine too. So,
Update on the animal care center. And
I mean, the rest of the road and the dirt work and the grading work is, and what's proposed in the bond issuance, so the actual building work is still being done, and, I saw Tom Wimbush out there, he's our project manager for that. I haven't talked to him today about where we are on that, but, yeah, everything in there's the building, the rest of it is for road construction, site work, well, not site work, but, the stormwater and water runoff and all that.
hopefully we can get the paving done like we intended. Any other questions, comments on the budget? Anything else to come before us as a committee?
Crickets.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Any discussion? Meeting adjourned.
I guess Johnny just said bye.
Where were those crickets coming from?